Well,
Also,
It's not like.
it's really funny that you. Yes, here's someone.
Wait,
Yeah, you know.
no, I'm not, dude, don't worry.
I know, but it's echoing.
CD. So if we,
Review.
no, I think what we should do is, if like Sammy joins and we're all grouped around a table kind of, would that be better for someone instead of your computer can pick it up? Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, you want me to put the computer?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I was gonna.
I don't have the Zoom pulled up.
Yeah.
Go over there.
Okay. Oh, Josh is here. Should I wait to admit him?
Up to you. You can
Meeting
tell
things
us.
Yeah.
You can.
Yeah, but also we're talking this, this Javier, but.
Here,
Hello.
thank you for coming.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's just things that like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he gave a presentation.
It's not, he's just been touring around with.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna.
Yeah, if you wanted to see this anywhere, you're welcome to. There's a wait for some people to. Like.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't know.
Also,
Yeah.
from Sasha.
Okay.
So then everyone else is in person.
Yes. I think it's just Jack.
Oh. Yeah.
Yeah, like my, I think 6 o'clock.
Okay. Cool. Yeah.
You're definitely in person. Yeah. You also like. Turn your camera real fast.
Hello, hi, Gabriel. The instructors.
Okay.
Yeah, Gabriel, yeah. Are you? Yeah. All right.
I'm Joe Ragsdale. Nice to meet you.
Sure.
Hi, Josh. We're gonna be starting in like a few minutes. We're just waiting for a few more people to come in person and on Zoom. Oh,
I managed.
microphone thing.
Most of the time.
Those sketches are so good.
And we.
Yeah, really good.
So even.
Yeah, I'm actually an artist. Brad from here in Greece.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, really? Yeah, we overlap a little bit. Yeah, I was upset.
Hi.
Hey, Jen, how are you?
See you.
Good.
Almost spring break.
Almost.
Yeah.
Yeah, one more. on Zoom.
Wow. Got you all hug? Yeah, I'm done.
Hey, Jen, Javier.
Oh, yeah, great to meet you. Great,
We're just waiting for one more person on Zoom.
great.
Liam.
Liam's joining on Zoom.
Yeah,
I
yes.
seen him this morning, if he was coming in person or on Zoom. I've never been in this room.
No, it's nice room presentation.
There is a fireplace back there.
There is.
Oh.
Oh, man, that would be nice. They should do that big fireplace. Yeah.
This-
I know.
We could put one on the screen.
Yeah, exactly, even just a TV and presentation.
Yeah.
With that.
I'm getting logged on.
They ran the vents from Subway up, that's like a super thick wall, up through the wall. And then supposedly connected to whatever, wherever the fireplace used to.
So did it smell like Subway bread all the time?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
guess what? Vents leaked for like the first year.
Yeah.
So it's just.
And it was- And so like one of the, there's some intake over here too, that pumped the smell into your office, that little office block back there. So it was Margot
That's the outside of the
McDonald
building.
who would be like working, and then all of a sudden the vent would come. It would be like in an oven, Segway oven. She had to complain. Yeah, it was something.
It's like an occupational hazard,
Oh,
red fumes.
yeah. Subway bread, which is
Subway
really
red, it's
particular.
very different. This whole area sometimes still smells.
just
like
wafts.
Subway
Oh,
bread.
yeah.
Every time I walk past,
Mhm.
like even coming to Dexter this way, I'll get a big whiff.
I think it's a sales tax there.
Definitely.
Why does it smell so much more than other bakeries though? It doesn't make sense.
I think it is a sales.
Yeah.
Turn the thing.
Like how Disney gets their customers pastries, I'm about to smell like vanilla.
Yeah.
cinnamon.
Well, maybe we can get started and then if Liam joins, I can.
Okay. We are Mustang Co-op. I'm Maddie. I'm Claire.
I'm Haley.
I'm Sammy.
So we kind of decided to take a quote from the master plan itself, just to kind of embody what it means and how our project would relate to it. So the master plan melds together Cal Poly's Learn by Doing culture with its commitment to environmental, social, and economic civility. So our concept is we want to create more affordable and sustainable living on campus, more focused towards upperclassmen, like third and fourth years who don't have on-campus housing and might be a little bit harder for them to find housing. So we decided to come up with the Mustang Co-op, which introduces an environmentally and economically sustainable, intentional community focused student cooperative or co-op housing on Cal Poly's campus for Cal Poly's 2035 master plan. And so we plan to partner with Cal Poly Housing and a couple of other local nonprofits to achieve this. And this is a little bit different than generic co-op housing because it really does focus on sustainable solutions and demonstrations. And so we also want to incorporate ideas and strategies for building a closed loop system within our co-op.
All right, so let's define our co-op because co-op can mean many different things to many different people, and ours is unique in its own way. So like we said, we'll be starting the Mustang Co-op, which will be a 501c3 nonprofit, and it will have a appointed board of directors that will run and manage the co-op and own it. And this doesn't mean that the residents will own a share of the co-op, but it does mean that the residents will have a democratic say in decision-making of the co-op. We want to offer an affordable housing option for college students. So we'll have food costs included in rent, and rents will be reduced with assigned labor and housekeeping tasks. This is because we won't need like a landscaper, we won't need like a housekeeper to come by. And then also in the nature of a nonprofit, we hope to have our rent lower than market value. And we want to have an economical, inclusive, and sustainable housing option for people of all different types of socioeconomic backgrounds. So these are some case studies that we are modeling our co-op off of. First, we have the Domes, which is part of Davis's Solar Housing Association. And this has co-ops that are on campus and off campus. So this association knows how to work with campus housing. The Domes here is an example of a co-housing community in which there's like all these different fiberglass domes on campus, and 26 students live all together, creating a sustainable, economically minded community with intentions to unlearn oppressive behaviors. Then we have the Berkeley Co-ops, which is 13 houses and 3 apartments, making it the largest co-op community in the United States. And this was originally founded to be like an anti-discriminatory and accessible education place. And it's been around since 1933, which really shows the longevity of a co-op. They're very long-lasting places.
And then another great example is right here in downtown SLO, the establishment. And it's a space that's centered around providing a space for intentional community, which means it's a group of people who choose to live together based on shared values, goals, and lifestyles. And this also serves as a co-op that's a close-knit community, a space where you can connect and bond with your housemates, making lifelong connections. And then a case study that we chose to follow the principles of a closed loop system was the Bullitt Center in Seattle, Washington. It's the greenest commercial building in the world, and our hope is that Mustang CoOp will be the greenest co-housing in the world. And the coolest part is that throughout the entire building, there's full transparency about the energy use metrics and sustainability reports, through having intriguing and informative diagrams that helps people easily comprehend each of the building systems. And this is something that Mustang CoOp would have throughout lobbies and common spaces in each building.
All right, so here we have our potential project partners in context, some of which you guys are here today. So first we're going to start locally and with Haslow, which is the Housing Association in SLO for affordable Section 8 and also provides resident services. And Nathan can speak more on to how we would work with them.
Yeah, so Oslo, we've been in contact with them, and obviously they have some pretty stringent requirements for being able to work with partners and then just funding their own projects. And so for students in particular, there are a couple instances in which Oslo could actually help fund this project if we were to ensure that certain demographics would be living in the co-op. And so a couple that off the top of my head I remember about are that it would have to be students with children who are almost at the age of 24, so really under that age, and also students who are possibly 6 months out of the foster care system after they've turned 18. And so we think this would be a really good opportunity actually for Cal Poly to not only make itself more accessible to really low income students, but also provide a housing option that A, they could afford, and B, could actually be funded with Hoslo Section 8 waivers.
Yeah. Thank you. And then we have the establishment. This is kind of like our local co-op model, and also we can have feedback and insight from the people who live and own this co-op. And then we also want to incorporate like sustainable business sponsors as like corporate philanthropy to donate to our co-op, give back to the community, and also like provide a way to meet their like sustainability goals or like fund those sustainability projects. Then we have our non-local project partners or contacts really. NASCO, which is the North American Student Co-op Association or organization, is really a national big organization that helps fund, but also provides lots of resources for co-ops and starting co-ops. And then we also have Davis's SCHA, which we have Josh here from, and they have on and off campus co-op model, like we mentioned before, and this will help give us insight for like how to work with campus housing and the benefits of having on or off campus co-ops. And then obviously we need Cal Poly's help in this. So we have Cal Poly Housing here. Thank you, Javier, for joining us. We'd love to work with you guys to implement this plan into a master plan and have your guys' funding to fund this project. We also are looking to work with Green Campus, which is like the center of sustainability, like campus community. And we'd love to like get more people to know about it and work with us. And then we have Cal Poly Sustainability as well to help them meet their sustainability goals through housing, but also help us get this project going.
So why is it important to have more housing typologies for Cal Poly? Like we mentioned, it would be an affordable housing option for targeting 3rd and 4th year students seeking on-campus housing. So since the housing market in SLO is very competitive. Also, it would help Cal Poly meet and possibly even succeed their sustainability reporting goals. Like many universities, it's important to reduce the carbon and environmental footprint of the campus. And so Mustang CoOp would have a learn by living philosophy, meaning it would provide hands-on learning about sustainability and how to do it on multiple scales from the overall building to everyday personal choices. It would offer sustainability related labs where students could further explore studies and experiments related to all these similar issues. And like we mentioned, partnering with Cal Poly Green Campus, it would add another level of community building of people who are interested in sustainable practices. And Mustang CoOp would provide easy access to these sustainability metrics for both Cal Poly to use in their reporting and then students to understand the environmental impact when living here. And as a sustainability living lab, it will lead to long-term economic sustainability for Cal Poly and for incoming students, since the utilities will be reduced through on-site solar panels and water catchment systems. And it's a more attractive housing option since many other universities are moving towards more green housing, making Mustang Co-op a great potential selling point for prospective students interested in sustainability. And the university could also earn more money in the long run by admitting more students who need affordable housing due to financial reasons. And then lastly, it will foster a community of like-minded people who want to commit to net zero emissions, want to make a positive impact on the environment, and address climate change solutions through sustainable housing. There's strength in numbers when people with similar aspirations and mindsets live together. They can easily advocate for policy changes, promoting sustainable practices, and even influencing other parts of campus to follow suit. And then, so how will Mustang Co-op be sustainable? These are our 4 green housing staples: solar, water, composting, and building technology. Like we mentioned, it would operate as a closed loop system, meaning that all waste and byproducts are continuously reused or recycled in order to minimize resource extraction and waste generation. Each of these 4 strategies will help to mitigate climate change in the local slow community through resource conservation, waste reduction, and lowering carbon and greenhouse gas emissions. Like I said, with solar, we'll be through California code, we'd already be installing solar panels throughout each of our buildings. And this will help Cal Poly slow reduce pressure on California's utility grid, since everything will be powered on site. And then we'd have both rainwater harvesting and gray water recycling, meaning that both these systems would be catching and filtering water for non-potable uses throughout the house. And all this could potentially decrease household water usage to up to 25% per year. For food, we'd be doing composting and edible gardens on site. This will help decrease overall waste volume by diverting organic waste away from landfills and boost the soil's ability to store carbon emissions. And lastly, throughout the whole design process for Mustang Co-op, we'd implement different sustainable strategies like green roofs, selecting locally and sustainably sourced building materials, and optical windows and shading, all of which are trying to help reduce embodied and operational carbon footprint of the building. And so the main big question is, how will Mustang Co-op be better than the dorms? Like I said, it will contribute to Cal Poly's philosophy of learn by doing. So give students the opportunities for hands-on learning, for sustainable experiments and research. And not only will students be able to learn necessary skills to upkeep a house, but they'll also be able to interact with and learn about each of the sustainable building technologies I just mentioned. And it'll foster more intentional engagement with sustainability and the building, where students can actually see and comprehend the impacts of what they're doing to the environment, like water and energy usage. It also helped foster intentional community for students compared to the typically isolating environment in the dorms. We'll do this through social events, weekly family dinners, and meaningful shared spaces, which gives students the chance to live in a community-driven, exclusive environment and develop valuable life skills. And lastly, as you can see, the rent is significantly more affordable compared to living just like on campus in the dorms, which is definitely more appealing and attractive for students, especially to choose allowing more lower income students to access Cal Poly housing.
As an example for implementation on campus, we've chosen 2 buildings. We have Jefferson Hall and Aaron Hall. That is right across from the stadium. As of currently, they are buildings just for offices and for faculty. But with our implementation, these could be transformed into something a little bit different. With Jefferson Hall on the top, in yellow, we have an extra house. In red, we have solar panels. And in green, we have a community garden. For Heron Hall at the bottom, in blue, we have a rainwater catching system. And in orange, we have an edible landscape.
So really, we identified 3 different sites where we think this could be implemented very easily. And so obviously Sammy just mentioned Heron Hall and Jesperson Hall. And these are some of the oldest buildings on campus, and they're really iconic, we think, to kind of just like the campus identity. And so we think returning the area to its original use, because they used to be student dorms, would be a really interesting way to kind of honor Cal Poly's history. We also have a couple of other sites that we're thinking about. So the first dark blue one is already planned on being more student housing. And so we think adding an additional typology would not be that difficult, and it would fit really well into the community. We also selected this light blue site, which right now in the master plan would be actually live-in faculty, kind of like what they're doing on Grand Avenue right now, with extra, housing for staff. And we think that could actually work really well, where kind of like where we already have professors living in the dorms at PCB, this would provide an opportunity for kind of that live by learning mentality we're trying to incorporate into the university.
So we also created a student survey and sent it out and put posters around campus and just had the QR code around for people to take just to kind of gauge interest in living in a sustainable housing co-op. So we asked a couple important questions such as, would you live in a co-op? And majority said yes. And it was a little bit split. And a lot of people said maybe too, which we took as pretty positive. So it's like, there's not a ton of no's. And then we said, what was your ideal rent? Most people said 700 to 1,000, which is ideal, but so we're kind of working on getting that lower rent, and we think that that'd be very attractive to students who are looking for lower rent, and obviously this is a pretty main issue. And then would we want to put it in the 2035 master plan? Majority said yes. Again, like, you know, maybe they don't exactly know how that would go, but it sounds like they're pretty on board to be implementing this type of housing onto campus and putting it in the master plan somehow. And then would they want to incorporate sustainability into their living? Again, majority said yes. Very few said environmental might be too much, you know, sustainable living could be a little bit too like green, I don't know, something like that. But again, a lot of people are on board with this sustainable living type of process and would be wanting to support it in the master plan. So this was pretty positive results. We had 100 responses and yeah, pretty positive on board. We think we would be able to gauge a lot of student interest in living in a co-op.
Right, this is kind of a very broad timeline and like next steps, but we would really need to start forming our nonprofit, be appointing that board of directors, and our name is in the works, but the Mustang Co-op for now. And then we would need to work with potential project partners like housing, and local, state, federal government to receive funding to fund our co-op. Then we need to find a site either on or off campus. This also is very dependent on whether or not housing wants to work with us. But if it's on campus, that would be ideal for our co-op. And also, when finding a site, we need to see if there is already a building existing or if we would need to build a new building. If we did need to build a new building, we would work with sustainable building materials and local sustainable like building companies, and or we could repurpose an already existing site, which would be the most sustainable option. Like no building is the most sustainable option. So that would be ideal. And then we would implement those sustainable living practices, which we outlined previously, into our housing concept. And then we would create a learning community through either housing and then applications for students to apply to live there. And then we would move in and manage the house.
As a whole, our project is aimed as a proposal. It's more so a stepping stone for people who are interested in a new affordable housing type when it comes to on-campus living. Essentially, this proposal is to challenge the stereotypical housing agenda for a more sustainable future towards our Cal Poly campus, as well as the ever-growing student enrollment. We've been reaching out to different types of community groups to help spread awareness, such as campus housing and on-campus student RAs. Other groups include people associated in Greek life or other cultural orgs, or even ASI organizations that would actually benefit from sustainable co-op living. For the regular everyday students, we've been doing student outreach in the form of our student surveys for live student feedback. What our team has been doing so far is going through a design process. By that, we've been doing research for successful case studies that encourage sustainable living, such as the establishment in SLO, as mentioned previously, and the Solar Community Housing Association happening in Davis. The next step would be going into a site analysis, figuring out what buildings could be of potential to being transformed. And after that, we would then create our small vignettes for examples of a before and after of highlighting those different programs and elements that would distinguish compared to the everyday dorm or.
All right, a lot of information in the past, 20 odd minutes. So just to kind of summarize. One, we see an issue with needing more affordable housing on campus for upperclassmen students. And we'd like to, deal with this issue via a co-op using a sustainably focused co-op intentional student community. And by co-op, we mean bringing together like-minded students that care about sustainability and run like other co-ops that aren't on campus as a nonprofit and a Cal Poly partner housing option. We're gonna kind of make a sustainability connection through a closed loop materiality system through solar, water, food, and building materials like we talked about earlier. As well through waste reduction and decreasing our CO2 emissions and reducing the carbon footprint for the entire project. And obviously, number 5 students saying build this kind of housing on campus is a long shot right now. And so really, we're just hoping to give this pitch not only to obviously Cal Poly Housing right now for further implementation, but also to pass this on to the next generation of students, I suppose, as kind of a guide for what they could do to try to move this project along. Thank you.
And we also have these like brochures that kind of summarize our whole presentation, if you want to give this to other faculty, especially within Cal Poly Housing. So yeah.
So, well, I guess first, if you have any questions for clarity, or if you wanted to ask anything, we'd love to answer that. Yes.
Can you have the guests introduce themselves?
Yeah, please do.
My name is Jenios, and I lived at the establishment for a long time in my youth, and now I'm one of the co-owners. And also co-op faculty in biology.
Javier Barajas, I'm the Senior Director for Facilities Operations and Housing. Just got here, so I've just reached my first year. Was at UCLA for 11 years prior to this, so.
Gabriel, so in architecture. You met Joe. Joe's the constructor of landscape architecture. Do you have anybody else to do it too?
Yeah, we have Josh. If maybe Josh, if you could unmute and introduce yourself, that would be great.
Hey, my name is Josh Redman. I'm a staff person over at the Solar Community Housing Association up in Davis, California. Operating both housing on and off campus. And just, yeah, really excited to see some new student co-op housing projects in the works. So thanks for having me here.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we're open for questions. We also have some questions we'd love to get your feedback on. So whichever you would like to go with first, be great.
No, go ahead.
It's a lot to unpack.
Yeah.
Well, it's you're talking about a master plan. There's so many different things that you have to look at. I think I must have read like the 2000, the 2014, the 2018, 2022, to even just get a grasp of what we're doing currently at housing and how the different changes and phases have kind of gone. Coming from UCLA, we have literally one of the largest housing off campus and on campus, and we're actually right next door to one of the UCLA co-op buildings. So I saw firsthand, coming from the facilities operational side, what it would take to kind of run something like that. So in your initial process as you're going through, you talk about the varying typologies, and there are, great examples in the last 20 years of other architects in other countries that have created these communities like apartments, and it's multi-family, but it really is like multi-level. So they'll have seniors, they'll have people with children, and even in Los Angeles, you have some people that are creating similar things. So that we'll have communal kitchens, and everybody lives in a park just for clean to watch and everything. So there's that aspect of how would that be different in terms of how you're providing that here at Cal Poly? They, for a long time, didn't have anything. I think when we graduated here in the 2000s, up until 03 and 08, we're really expanding it. And so it's really been live wherever you can off campus once you're done with your first year, if you even just live here in your first year. So I'm really interested in what typologies are you trying to create? One of the best ones in terms of examples that I saw at Cal Poly Pomona was that they had that sustainability arm and you could live there and you could see like what it would take to really be sustainable. I would have loved to have seen something out at Poly Canyon, like this is what we built and this is how the sustainability is, so that you can really start creating that net zero focus that you want on land that we technically, I don't know if it's the architecture or not, like owns that part, but it's one thing where you have to kind of then pull back a little bit more and say, okay, like what is the cost of land? And as we're going through even just building in one of the most expensive areas on campus, because we're like a few feet below where bedrock is. So the amount of cost to take that out and put anything below grade, it's just so expensive. So then we do have other areas we could populate. Well, then you take the grade space, the ag space, you're gonna have a fight on your hands in terms of what it's gonna be. So you say like, oh yeah, we could just take one building. And one thing that we're even going through here is like, we wanted to create more mixed use at the new housing project. And that would have required like campus health and well-being, or ASI, or, you know, Cal Poly Partners to commit X amount of money just to put that in the space. And it's like, well, we said like, come to the table, it's a tangible project, you know, can you bring that up? And it was just like, nobody came up. So then it was just like, oh my God, like, what are we gonna do? At UCLA was a little bit different in terms of how that funding came across. But it was like, okay, we'll front it, housing will use it. And if in the future, other spaces want to use it, then we'll go ahead and we'll let you guys use it. So there is some negotiations, you know, like allocation of either the property or the use of a space that can happen, but you need to have like everything really thought out, and that speaks more to the typology. You want to live there. You say that you want to lower the cost of it, but that's the thing. Like operationally, it's expensive because I didn't see anything with regards to how are you going to get rid of wastewater? How are you going to have sewer costs? Chad has done a great job in terms of looking at the future for Cal Poly in terms of how we're going to recycle our own water, what we're going to do with the sewer water, capture it here. We do have some agreements with the city, but it's like, you have to really look at like, what is the net zero? Like, what is the system that you're going to use, right? And so something like phased over time, like put in your solar and then, okay, then put in something for your recycling the water that you have from your sinks and your showers, as well as water capture from the rain. But then it's also like, well, let's put in another system that actually recycles the laundry water to reuse it. And then when it's done, then you can send it out. And then you can send it to the water infrastructure program so that they can go use it in the ag. There's a lot of that, like really getting into the details, but then it's like, okay, we don't want to get too granular. Let's pull back and say that that's where we want to go. So like every single system you really have to look at, and it's mind blowing because it's just like you're a student and you have all these other things, and you're just like you almost need a separate consultant to come in and like say like this is the things that you need to have in the program and put in, because even as we're moving through our project, there's some things that they haven't thought of, things that nobody's been through the process. And so we're having to educate the contractor, we're having to educate the architects. Like these are the things you need to look at. And that's one thing that's advantageous when you have all these different disciplines really feeding back, knowing what you're going to need in the program, funding that you're going to get, where the location is. Just a lot to really look at. I don't know if that was helpful at all.
Yeah, totally. We'll take notes on that, and then when we pass the project on, if it gets to that point, we'll definitely have like more of a concise plan of like how we want to tackle the utilities and like the sustainability aspect of everything. And like I think consulting with some sort of consulting firm like Rincon, I know works on the 2035 master plan, maybe having some sort of like consultation with them beforehand just to make sure it's feasible would be important for the next group to carry on.
It sounds like from what you're saying that things are still fairly fluid, they're figuring themselves out. So how open do you think Cal Poly is to having housing models that are either built ground up or reused in other buildings?
Well, I think what I've noticed on the master plans, if you look at, I think it was 2018, where people were like, why don't you have family housing, why don't you have this? You can, but it's, I think it's more of a CSU mindset. And you see, because we have our own, like even even Berkeley can't compete with how we provide housing at UCLA, because the way we run the program is very sustainable. Like, well, it was sustainable dollar wise with regards to how we were acquiring the property and how we were managing properties. We don't have that here, so to set up that program and that process is going to take a lot of time. So what does it look like? I don't know. The original program to do housing, it was for faculty over on
Grand.
Grand and Slack, was slated to be more dense. And at some point, somebody changed the decision over the last 3 years. And they decided to just put in regular housing to be similar to what's over on the other side of Santa Rosa. So it's like, well, you will get more money coming in because housing prices are so high, but you won't get the density that we're looking for. You won't get that different housing. So then what do you got to do? What we did at UCLA is we started getting other properties adjacent to campus. Because most of these are rentable anyway, and if your house is like $1 million or something just across the street, you buy a property there. If it's deep enough, you can increase the density of it and then build it, which is great. How does that look like in terms of development? I don't know, but at least it's only $1 million, right? Compared to 30 million or 20 million, or even 100+ million. Right now, we're looking at a cost per bed of like $240,000 per bed. I think.
That's for the new dorm project on the hill.
Yeah, and that's what we're trying to get it, like everything down, and that's using modular construction, where we're building everything in Los Angeles, having a truck here, complete and utter like value engineering. Like, what is it that we could put in? What's the minimum that we need? What's the student experience that we want? It's
$240 a bed.
$240,000, which is okay, because UCLA was in some article that I read last week was they just bought a property for $60 million. It had 60 units in it, so it came out to like $435,000 a unit. And I was like, dude, each unit probably had a double or a triple, so I think it came out to about $1,700 to $1,500 a month to kind of live there. But they may not pay for utilities. There's some kind of something that they work out for. So it's, once you start getting into the numbers and you start seeing things, which is one thing that the contractor here as we're working through, like, what is the pro forma? Oh, so this is how much debt that we have and how much income are we going to have coming in? What are operational costs going to be? And how much is it that we actually can afford or have to subsidize, which is why housing currently has several $1 million now of grant money that we're setting aside for affordable housing for students. They can't afford to live on campus, but they can't afford to pay the whole amount. So we're feeding that back because we know that that's increasing over time. And you know how expensive it is to live in Sloan, just the cost of living. I don't know, did I answer your question?
Yeah. How much was the establishment per room?
Oh, that's a great question. I guess $100,000.
You could put a lot more beds in those rooms.
I wondered if you guys have thought about a phased approach where, we have some dorms that are themed. And so if you could partner up with Green Campus to be like, okay, let's implement the culture that you're looking for in the existing dorm facilities, or maybe it's like one floor or one building is like the sustainability dorm. And then that generates a cohort of students who are pumped. And maybe, it's a smaller subset of things that you could do in that space, but you would have like the student, the idea of it, and you'd have some cultural cohesion there. And then
you could develop sort of the cultural practices that you would need in order to eventually like launch. And, you know, it's interesting because for a while, Cal Poly was trying to have all of their new buildings be LEED certified buildings, so there's synergy there if a new building is built on campus anyway. So then you're just looking at like, what are the costs, the additional costs to all about? And then I just wonder, like, could you do that in an existing dorm building? Like, take one of them as the model building. Maybe it has more infrastructure associated with sustainability. And then, but anyway, I think you could keep the idea of it rolling if you just sort of like created a pocket within the existing housing structure.
That's been interesting, noticed in our studies is that the best part of a lot is that what we're proposing is really similar to just Greek housing or Greek
Yeah.
life without some of the certain sustainability principles that I know. The houses, they might have like a chef or something inside that like has staff on call basically, but something we are also looking at is like use that kind of the phased approach. Because obviously a co-op kind of housing isn't just based off infrastructure.
Yeah.
To your point, it's based off the cultural development, so. Yeah, we do hope that while we can develop the infrastructure at some point to incorporate into housing, because obviously. Once the infrastructure there it becomes easier to live a co-op style life, I suppose, even just developing the culture and like from the dorms, the new dorms.
Did you guys, why the nonprofit? What advantage is that to the project?
We were just looking at different like co-op models, and most of them had a nonprofit in keeping that longevity of like who you paying, or like who's the landlord, and it was just easier to have that overall nonprofit to be able to keep that management consistent.
Are there models on our campus of outside nonprofits? You know, I know that Cal Poly Partners is a nonprofit, but I don't know if any other outside entities operate on campus. So that's like one thing, that's sort of a fork in the road. If you go the off-campus route, then it seems certainly. If you go the on-campus route, you might want a different university, you know, structure, probably Cal Poly Partners or within housing. Are you within Cal Poly Partners? Was housing under that?
No, not ever.
Okay.
And Cal Poly Partners is their own thing, their own auxiliary, and we are separate.
And then everybody told me when I was getting into this establishment business, like there's grants and everybody, like there's just low income housing and Haslow cares, everybody cares. And no one writes the check. That was my experience. And so, like in my real world experience with the establishment, it like doesn't pencil out. It's not working, you know, like currently with our loans, we're losing $3,000 every month. And so even though we want to keep rents low, we also don't want the project to go under, you know, that's like defeats the purpose. And so, and our biggest problem is the banks and the people who are willing to lend you money for such a project. So, that's always the problem, is the banks. They always seem to come out ahead. But anyway, so that's like, seems like a good idea to keep rents low. And then the financial realities of it, like, they suck.
About I mean, one of your proposals was there was a certain amount of like work that's done, like cooperative. Which probably doesn't happen a whole lot in the dorms, I assume, but how much maintenance could potentially be saved or other things if the students are actually maintaining the building? Would that be a place that cut costs?
Yeah. We use APPA is the organization that gives basically general labor hours that it would take to complete certain tasks for custodians, for trades. So we're talking plumbers, HVAC, lighting, electric. landscaping if you need to do landscaping. And so you will need to have that periodic person come in at such a dollar a rate. You already have the amount of time that it would take to, you know, fix a toilet, remove a toilet, get your septic tank pumped out, whatever it is that you want to have in terms of cost to remove that. You can easily calculate some projection, like this would be the savings, but again, there's these embedded operational costs that they're fixed, like you're always gonna have those. So then by going net zero, you do reduce a little bit of that, because that just reduces your utility cost, but you can't control, like, you know, Gabriel moves in and he's got an HD TV and, you know, a laptop, and he's here 24/7 and he's mining Bitcoins that you don't know about. And it's all of a sudden your electric bill is like, hey, like we're getting this huge thing. Like, how do you then control that or make that awareness, or how do you, you know, get your board to like really protect against like who's coming in, who do we let in? Like, is it an agreement between all the people that are living there, like let these people in or not? Which is why I think when we're talking about added costs, which is why we wanted that mixed use kind of mentality on the first floors of the dorms was or the new buildings for the rest of us was like, what else can you do? Can you provide services? Can you provide a third-party bakery to come in, scouts or something? You have to provide something that brings money in, especially if you're a not-for-profit, where it offsets those fixed costs all the time. That'll allow you to keep your cost of living low.
Does campus housing subsidize the housing, or do you try to operate on a profit?
No entity operates on a profit at a public entity, so like not UCLA, not, you know, they would only eat X amount of money, but let's say we save up $100 million in housing, we have it in our reserves, because we're Cal Poly as a whole. Cal Poly Partners is like, hey, we're gonna acquire some other building over here, that'll increase our debt. Well, they look to see like how many other departments have that money in reserves and say, yeah, you can go ahead and buy that. So then they look at the whole debt model and what your debt ratio is, you know, how much money you have in reserves, which is what you can pay. And that's the thing, when they are buying stuff, don't even tell us. And then we're building our building, all of a sudden it's our debt ratio gets worse because they added more debt without us knowing. And it's not Housing Center, it's not Cal Poly Partners, it's all of campus's debt. You know, we all go down as one. So that's the thing that they, you know, they don't know once you get here. So we don't look to get a profit, but we have to be able to calculate like over 30 years or over 50 years, the life cycle of the building that you're acquiring. What's it going to take to maintain that? And what are the costs overall, like not just to operate currently, but what's it going to cost me to replace that roof in 20 years, depending on what that is. You know, in 30 years, if it's copper pipe, replace your copper pipe. Right now, we have the red bricks that have been there since one of the first ones, right? Since the 60s and 70s. So you're 10, 15 years older than I am. So it's just like, okay, now you got to replace everything. So all the sewer lines need to be replaced, water lines need to be replaced, the windows need to abate, everything, which is super expensive. So all these things you have to do. What you buy, when you buy, then what does that cost in the long term once you start replacing it and incorporate that in your it's called the pro forma.
What size are you guys thinking about? Like, how many students would this serve?
Well, it depends if we're doing multiple houses, but we wanted, like, our goal is about 20 people per house.
Okay. Yeah, I just wondered if like some of the weird houses that are like out in Cal Poly lands, you know, there's like the sheep union house and the other house and up in Poly Canyon, you got a couple houses, like if those would be, I'm sure they're suffering some deferred maintenance as well, but you already sort of have you know, like-minded students, there's some kind of intention in those houses. They're a little further out, that might be, I don't think they could hold 20, but you could imagine potentially trying it out in one of those spaces.
Actually, it's interesting you mentioned that because I know that the art department, sent a member of the part of Cal Poly. They're actually trying to get the Poly K ticket program back up again.
Oh.
And so from the proposals I've had to read for my job, I've seen that they're hoping to actually basically get a new unit back out there and then have at least a student or like a full-time staff member at this rate live out there instead of, I think that was quite an interesting path.
Yeah.
Like if we go to them and say, hey, if we gave you 20 students to take care of the canyon,
Yeah.
what does that look like?
Right. Yeah, in that situation, it's great if somebody has a problem that they need to pay for. And you could solve that problem by putting a bunch of people there. Then you're providing that service, it's a plus. They just need to build you 20 bedrooms and a water treatment.
Yeah.
Back to those two halls, I was pretty curious about that. And I didn't know that those were dorms originally.
Oh,
Yeah.
the original ones, yeah.
I believe they were for football players and it acted as their like dormitory.
Oh, interesting. Do you know how long ago they were converted? Do you think that this is potentially more feasible as converting some of these buildings rather than ground up? Or what are the challenges versus ground up construction?
If it's been abated, I think you'd be fine.
What does abated mean?
You remove the hazardous materials, so any
Asbestos,
asbestos,
lead.
lead, yeah, so any paint that's something. There's a building similar to this at UCLA that's on the Hillgard side, which is the east side of campus. It was like a woman's dorm, and they completely gutted it and redid the whole thing. It's beautiful, it's all concrete. But around that period of time, those are all concrete buildings, so you see like these rafter tails that are coming out of this concrete, and it's like, wow, beautiful. But you go inside and it's just asbestos, and lead, and you're just like, okay, it's not the best. I don't know how, you know, Josh or at Berkeley, how they done something similar, refurbished something like that, but it tends to be in the millions sometimes.
Yeah, Josh had to leave, but
Oh, he did.
yeah, yeah, I just checked the chat, but we can always ask him questions as well.
You know, that's the most expensive, and then the second thing is because if, let's say it was a masonry building, you have to relocate any plumbing. You do, right?
Yeah, kind of interesting, maybe. Look into this one a little bit more, just in, you know, when it was converted, and if it was kind of more recent, then it probably has been abated. You know, like is some of that plumbing still in place that kind of supported housing? Did they like get rid of it? You know, it's interesting to kind of look into that, because that seems like if it was already housing before, they must have had some infrastructure in place. Unless they took it out.
They're famous here for leaving it in place, like abandoning, and then just running a whole new line.
One thing that I think could be just an interesting model moving forward is that our idea of what housing looks like is hasn't really changed much. Like it's a bedroom and the bedroom has these elements to it. And one thing that's cool about one thing that is cool about the establishment at the time is that it fell into the boarding house camp because it provided a room with a sink and then everything else was shared, right? And so that's similar to the dorms, but I just think there's, you know, pod housing has become an answer to the density problem where it's like you get a bunk and you have a very minimal personal space. And then that allows you to make the most use of the common space. And that seems like a way, especially for old dorms, right? The rooms are going to be small. You could think about like the portable trailers we have and that service faculty offices. And you can maybe put 2 or 3 faculty offices. Well, what does that look like if you have like personal pods and then shared outdoor living space. You know, I think that's one way in which the establishment is really successful at generating culture is that your room's pretty small and you don't hang out very much. You go out into the common space and that's where you have all the social interaction. And then the other thing I wondered, this is probably a bad idea, but you know, mixed use is a hot topic in cities, not so much on campus in terms of blending residential with academic classroom space. And there's good reason for that. It's probably the right answer, but I just wonder about it, right? Like what happens if you have classrooms on the bottom floors and then you have housing upstairs, or we're starting to put you know, food retailers in more places. I don't know, because
It's one of the things I was proposing. Because, so both times that I was here, there's always one student that would live in the studio. Right? And so it's like you go and you shower over there and you come back and like, dude, because you can afford it, right? There's always one guy in generation currently.
Where's one?
Oh, really?
People build lofts in the studio.
Yeah, and fire marshal doesn't let it, right? So,
Well, fireworks. For
yeah,
wow,
exactly.
Got, yeah.
but that is like a truly radical
Yeah.
model, right? And Cal Poly already has the shower facilities at the rec center.
Yeah.
Students already have access to it, like, you know, and so how do you need to build a bunch of new showers in a new building? Or can we just change our attitude about like weird and funky living where you like just use the rec center? I don't know, I mean, that's
I
like,
mean,
yeah.
so it's, you know, a design issue, you know, and, but I think also part of it, as discussed earlier, is a culture issue as well. So I do think it's interesting, maybe think of a phased approach. If you were just to, you know, go into like a dorm, how would you create the culture of sustainability there? Like what additional things might need to be changed or adapted? Like, would there need to be like a renovation to allow more, you know, maybe it's more sustainability focused things in the dorm, right? Maybe you can monitor what you're doing. Does the space need to change so that students are a little bit more engaged with each other rather than like, you know, how do you get them to actually like cook food there? Is it because the kitchen sucks? You know, it's like a bigger space.
Yeah.
So, you know, what would those things be? So that can be an interesting thing if you're just like renovating the dorm. Or, you know, how could it exist in the dorm that or renovation like this to turn it into like the ideal place versus like a complete ground up. Like those are like three different traditional models.
What do you guys think the next best steps for us would be, just so we have kind of a good overview of where we're headed?
I think what Kate just mentioned was a good, you know, you could imagine like 3 pathways, like options. Like one option is begin right away by creating a residential life community. And then it could be like the renovation model and the ground up model.
It's hard to kind of say, as we're transitioning from these, I guess, static complexes that have only one thing outside of PCB, which is the only thing that can teach, but even then don't go scam to kind of then do something more. I think the integration of what EU and S is doing and creating the sustainability programs, doing the water competitions, water saving competitions that they have. When I came on board this year, we were looking at trash because the amount of trash in a 7-story, 9-story, 12-story building, it's going to be huge, immense. You're talking right now, I think we have 1 4-yarder bin at the Red Bricks. We're going to have 4 typically on the 7-story one and 6 on even higher. 6 4 cubic yard bins for one building. So you can imagine like how much trash here. So then it's like, okay, how do we reduce that? How do we stop it? The bulk of the waste that was being produced is from dining. They've done a great job at doing their own sustainability program and doing these clamshell washable food containers, so that, you know, at the end of the day you go and it's like you buy food and you bring it back to the dorm and then you throw it away. It's like, let's change that model, let's do something else. So what does that mean? It means educating students. And, you know, a lot of you may have a lot of friends, have a lot of entitled kids that are not used to cleaning, not used to doing things, you know. At UCLA, our population was higher than 50% Asian. And the culture in Asia was that the mom would take care of them, right? And so it was like, they did not clean. We'd come in after a year of these grad students that came from abroad. You'd see this little walking trail on the carpet, you know, finally, they would go cook, and then they'd come to the bathroom, and they'd go to their bedroom, and that was their little path. And you're like, you only been here 9 months, and it's like, it's so dirty. But it was like, they never at once, like once a month, said, hey, I have to clean my bathroom, I have to clean my kitchen, I have to clean something. And that's the thing, it's like, we want to do the same thing here, where it's like, okay, let's educate these kids, like, this is how you recycle, this is how you do laundry, like, just laundry is like is a puzzle to some of these kids, you know? And that's the thing, is like, how much more information can we bombard, or it doesn't, they become desensitized, and just no longer even pay attention to it, so they have to care, they have to really, but how do we build that culture in Cal Poly? So we start with the first years, it goes into the second years, and then it goes into your program. Yeah, they've learned all these different things of how we actually recycle, and then you'll have educated versus having to start from scratch for whoever goes into it.
Maybe a last thing for you guys, like, who do you think that they should talk to? Or, you know, is there somebody they can pass this off to?
I think Brain Campus is a great,
Yeah.
stable program of, if you've got a group of them to pursue it year after year, I think that would be a good thing. The other thing I was thinking about is, okay, my final thoughts. One, you're never gonna get reduced rent through shared shores. It's like, we do nothing at the establishment, like we pay no one for anything, and we're still losing money. And, that's like, I think the financial realities of trying to pull this off, like, the amount of money you save by trying to get students to do it is unrealistic. And, the only way to keep rents down is to have it be subsidized by somebody. So who is that? So how do you make the argument to Cal Poly Housing that this endeavor is like worth them losing money every month on? So then I was thinking, maybe you combine it with an academic facility on sustainability, where it's actually a classroom, it's actually a learning laboratory with all of your mechanical systems, where people come there to learn about design and sustainability. And I think then you might have access to some more resources that would support the whole thing, because, you know, there's grant money for that, there's state money for that, there's facilities money for that, if you do it in an educational context. And so that might be worth looking into.
Learn by living, I love that.
I know, that's a great slogan. That's a really great
You
slogan.
guys could steal that.
Leave me using it already.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, no, I completely agree with that. And I think the Pomona sustainability, that neighborhood that they have is a great resource to kind of see how they're utilizing it. Because students live there for a year and they do all the sustainability things. If you couch it with that, that's definitely something that we could get behind. Because then you're getting the academic funding from this side from it, not just the house. And currently we only do I think 90+% of everything that pays for housing we get from people living there. But then, you know, this is how much money housing has coming in. Other departments don't, so then other departments get a portion of that. It's like, okay, we'll take X percentage out. It's like, but you're not giving us anything, like programmatically, you're not helping anything. It's just, but it's for the entire campus. Again, it's like, it's not just one person's debt, one department's debt, it's everybody's debt. So it's a whole thing. So that integration of the academics and that's what I would do.
Do you think Cal Poly would be open to having an outside sponsor kind of deal? Like if we went to REI and pitched our idea and kind of almost like advertise it as like REI co-op living and then had them sponsor it if they were really interested and kind of made like more like outdoorsy and sustainability focus. And then on top of that, maybe had some sort of like classroom living type of funding in that way. Do you think that would be possible? Or like, is there any past cases where they've had like outside sponsors for housing or anything on campus?
You can always have a sponsor. There's money, yeah.
Yeah.
You look at like all the sports stadiums.
Yeah.
Corporate meetings now.
The one thing that I see missing in here is at UCLA, we had a ropes course. So it's this area where you have like these huge poles, and they have like nets and ropes that you climb across, and they're used for team building. And so different departments would basically like go for the day, they take their teams out, they climb a pole and you jump onto like a trampoline or something to build a team where you.
I'm loving it, ropes bars.
Yeah. Or
Work that in.
across the rows, like holding hands, and you're trying to, you're fully strapped up, but it's scary, right? Cause you're like 15 feet off the ground, but it's like something that you're providing a service, it's on your side, it's sustainable, like it's integrated with that. Like, that's how you have to think, like, what else can we add if we get a side? That's why I'm like, there's a perfect, Poly Canyon is the perfect place to kind of have something. It's like, well, how much are they gonna let you have? But it's like, well, it's already a graveyard. Why not utilize it to what it could be? So if you did have a ropes course, hey, we all go out to the ropes course, it's an adventure, come back, go do your thing. I don't know, just thought.
Yeah.
So thank you guys.
Thank you so much
Great work.
for
Joining.
How fun.